I was living with my own traumas inside, and I was living with my own insecurities and fears and doubts up until I was 16. And
What were those traumas? Can you talk about them, or are they still traumatic?
they're still traumatic in a sense that I haven't really worked with anyone to cope with them. I haven't really unpacked them. I just know that they're there because I experienced them. But I haven't found the right person to, work on that with. Because that's definitely some internal healing that's going to take me some time, to figure out why it's affected me in the way it has and why I consider them to be my traumas.
Do they scare you?
Yeah, they do. Not that it's going to happen again or that I'm fearful that, I can possibly be put into a situation. Nothing like that. Just mainly because when I think back to myself as a child and just, I guess, some of the ways that I was raised, some of the things that I was told, I never really put much energy or thought into until now. And, looking back, trying to reflect back, trying to unpack things that could have been causes for, my emotional distress as a young child. It's a lot, and it's really difficult. So
Those triggers.
triggers, yeah.
Is it hard to unpack because if you unpack it, you feel like you'll hurt people that were not responsible but did the best that they could and will not be able to deal with the emotional tumult?
Yes. Yes. That's exactly where the fear lies, is that I don't want to even admit to myself that some of the things and some of the ways that my parents handled myself and my brother were extremely damaging to me as a young developing child.
And that's hard for every parent
Yeah.
to process, because we all, as parents, damaged our children in some way or another. Not purposely, but doing what we thought was the right thing at that time. But it's the truth that really makes us and sets us free. And until you can really say the truth in love, you're going to always carry that burden of not unpacking. And the freedom won't ever really come because of the perfection that we want others to think that we are. Nobody wants anybody to think that their family was less than perfect, or that I, as a parent, missed the mark.
Something,
right, or did something that affected the emotion of our sons or our children. And so with that said, in 2017, you go to a deep, deep, dark place. And when do you decide that I'm gonna take my life? Was that over a process, or again, was that short window?
It was one of the quickest decisions I've ever made in my entire life. It was the most impulsive thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And I remember that time period in my life very vividly. I remember that all of the lies that I had been keeping from my family came to surface, and I was in very deep trouble. Not only with my family, but I had messed up pretty bad, and so I was dealing with all of that hurt and pain on top of everything that I had mentioned earlier about, the insecurities and the shame and, trying to fit in and clothe myself in perfection. And so that happened right around the same time that my senior year, would have been my senior year, cheerleading tryouts were happening. So they happened at the very end of the school year. And this was the very end of my junior year of high school. And so I decided that I didn't want to cheer anymore, and I quit. And that was a huge blow, not only for me to take, but also for my family that I had made in cheerleading.
How do you come up with that decision? I quit after being a cheerleader. I'm going into my senior year. Take us through that, because parents always want to know, why would you quit in your senior year?
There's a valid reason, and then there's my reason. The reason, at the time that I kind of said that I wasn't going to try out was because they were making the competitive team mandatory. So if you were on the cheer squad at Dutchtown High, that means you had to also be on the competitive cheer squad too. And that required, the same amount of practice, but doubled. So it was more practice, more time with the team, more time in the gym, more dedication. And at the time I said that I just didn't want to do it because I wanted to hang out with my friends and I didn't want to have to be tied down to cheerleading. But the truth is that definitely held some truth, because that was true for me, slightly, but there was another truth to that. And the other truth to that was the fact that, I didn't really feel like I had made progress. I felt like I was still the same cheerleader that I was as a freshman, and I wasn't getting better. And, there's a hierarchy on the cheerleading squad. And so I didn't feel like I would, achieve my goals or, amount to anything. And the younger girls that were coming onto the squad were so talented, and they were just really talented. And I didn't feel like I could measure up. And I just was, again, in that loop of telling myself, not you, not you, not you, you're not, you're not, you're not. And so I thought it would be better off I thought that they would be fine without me. And I thought that there would be someone who was tiny like me, who they can throw around like they did me, and she would be prettier than me, and she would be better than me. And I was like, you know what? That's best for them. So I thought that I was doing what was best for them in that sense. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably better off if I don't, get back on the team. So.
What's your conversation like with your mom?
Now?
No, then.
Oh.
When you come home and say, I'm not going to try out. Because obviously you don't tell her your reasons.
Yeah. I, at that time, had become extremely manipulative. And so I used my mom's, soft points and her weak spots to make her okay with my decision. I'm ashamed that I was like that, but I'm proud that I am self-aware enough to know that I was at one point, and that I've grown from it.
Absolutely.
But the fact that I can physically and mentally remember, doing that to her and, unpacking her thoughts whilst I was thinking about what I was going to say. So I manipulated her to believing that, the only reason that I didn't want, to try out again was because I didn't want to have to, sacrifice my friends. And she was hurt by that still. She was confused by that still. She didn't really understand why couldn't I have both worlds? Why couldn't they both exist? Like they had been my entire life.
But she went along with your decision.
Yeah, she supported my decision.
Is it a red flag for anybody, or have they just taken you at face value? You've grown up. You don't want to be tied to it. You want to enjoy senior year.
It was they just took it at face value. They took my word for it, and they were like, you know what? This is expected. We expected some girls to not, try out again because, this is a decision that we made for them when before they could make it themselves. So they kind of expected it, and it wasn't like a warning sign like it should have been.
So now you've gotten everybody to buy in on your decision. to the best of their ability to process where you are. When does it get so dark that you say, you know what, I'm done?
I had gotten back, so it was the summer that I made the attempt. It was in June, and my mom and I were invited on a trip with a local photographer to New York for 3 days, 3 to 4 days. And we were in the city, carefree. And before that trip is when my parents had come to the realization of all my lies and everything, was kind of on the downfall of my life. And that trip came in right on time. And so we went to New York City, and it had...
So you could get away from
Yes.
all the heat
Yes.
that you had created for yourself.
I had actually literally escaped my own reality for like 3 days. And it was great. It was the most fun that I had, most good, organic fun that I had in really a long time. And I was with girls that some of them I was in school with, but others that I had just met. And so I got to meet them, and it was just the girls and their moms. So it was a huge girls trip. It was truly, like I said, the most fun that I had had in a while. And so I was just away from my reality, and I had escaped it. And then so coming home to that same reality, and it's summertime, so typically I'd be at practice, but I'm not on the cheer team anymore, so I don't have practice. So
now you're at home to face.
Yeah, so I'm at my home by myself. My dad's always said that idle time is the devil's playground. And, that's all I had was idle time. And, I had a job and, things like that. But for the most part, I was not really busy. So I don't know, it was the very beginning of my summer. And everything I had mentioned before, was right in that time period. And I can remember the day, clear as day. I think it was a Wednesday. And I had work later on that afternoon. And my mom had left for work. And she came in my room and we had a small conversation. And it was a conversation about how her and my dad can better support me and help me get through what it is I'm going through. Because they knew that I was struggling. They obviously didn't know to what, weight I was struggling, but they knew I was struggling. So at that time, they just wanted to know what they needed to do to support me and help me.
Could you tell them?
Could I have?
No, at that moment, were you able to say?
Oh, no. Mm-mm. No, even if I wanted to think of the words to say, I would be stopped before I could even think of them.
Like some internal force was shutting your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did you say when your mom said, how can we support you?
I don't remember exactly my response, but I know that I behaved in the way that I had been behaving towards her. Mm-hmm. Just like, okay, thank you. Kind of just very not receptive to what she's saying. It kind of sounded like just background noise when she was talking to me towards, that time period. Just kind of sounded like background noise. And so we had that very brief conversation. She left for work and said, just call me if you need anything. And that was something that I had did quite a lot, was call my mom at work. I had her work number. At the time, she was a receptionist, and she was answering the phone. She was the front line. So anytime I rang, she picked it up, and it was her. But she did have to put me on hold quite a lot while she was on that job. So that was kind of a regular thing for us, was, me calling her and then her putting me on hold for a little bit, her coming back and us talking, whatever. But so she left for work, says, call me if you need anything. And so she leaves, and I don't remember exactly where my head was at, to be honest with you. I don't know where it was at all in those moments before, thinking to make that decision. I just know that I looked at the clock and I saw that I should probably get up and get ready for work. And so I started to get ready for work. And my mom actually called me. Mm-hmm. And so she called me and, just wanted to continue our conversation from the morning. And, I wasn't very talkative. I wasn't very conversational at all at that point. And so she was doing most of the talking. But I do remember her having to put me on hold more, this phone call in particular. And so I remember, I don't really truly, like I said, remember where my head was at. I just remember thinking to myself that, if I'm gone, if I die, then they won't have to deal with this mess anymore. Mm-hmm. They won't have to deal with this.
All the things that
the emotional distress that I was putting on them. And I was kind of pulling in between them as a married couple because my mom took my side most of the time and, took up for me, and where my dad was more on the fence with me. And so I kind of put a pull between their marriage, and I felt shame and guilt for that. And my brother had never done anything to really upset them or really hurt them. So I was very envious of that and didn't understand why I just couldn't be the easy kid. And so very, comparison there. But just overall, just felt like if I was not here anymore, then they wouldn't have this problem to deal with. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that feeling was my own feelings and my own insecurities and my own, lack of self-love came into play in the fact that, I've always had this crazy, huge fear of the future. I've always been terrified of the unknown. And not feeling like I was good enough or would amount to anything, that fear of the future was really painful and really hard to grapple with because I didn't ever feel like I was smart enough. And that was another thing too. All of my friends were getting, college letters, and stuff, and I never got a single one in the mail. I did okay in school. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't like the best student. So, not feeling like I would even be able to
compete.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it was not only a competition with everyone else, it was a competition with myself. And it's so crazy because I can very vividly remember, being two totally different people in my own head. It was who I always was. I was myself, who I am now. I was always this person. I just always had this other person on the forefront of it.
And that other person said what to you when you went and got your dad's gun?
This is the easiest thing. This is the easiest way out for you. Pretty much. That's what my brain was telling me.
And so do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I do. I don't remember much of it, but I do know that in the moment that I went and got his weapon and I had it, I had been trained. My dad trained me and, we practiced shot and stuff like that.
So you know well how to use the gun and how to handle the gun.
Yes, I did know. So like I said, I got it and it wasn't very much time before.
Was it not locked?
It was not locked up. No, ma'am.
Because you and your brother are teenagers, y'all are.
Yeah. My brother actually had just, so that was also something that was very big change in my life, was my brother, who growing up was my best friend. We are only barely 2 years apart, so we did everything together as kids. He had just moved away for college. And so that was really difficult, having him gone out of the house for the first time in my entire life, because that was a huge void that I dealt with for a short period of time, because it wasn't long after he moved that I attempted. But yeah, that was huge and very difficult for me. So
so the clock is ticking. So you know that mom will be
Yes.
coming home soon.
I knew she got off work closer to 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And this was like early afternoon.
Okay.
So I knew that I had some time, but to be frank, I wasn't really thinking about anybody else or anything else. I just had this overwhelming feeling that this is the easiest thing for me, and then I'll finally be able to rest after this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when you go and you get the gun, is it automatic? Is there a plan of how you will implement?
There's no plan. There's no plan at all. And that was one of the first questions that I was asked was, what were you aiming for? You know, where were you trying to aim? And I looked at them and white like a ghost, and I'm like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And so when you pull the trigger, do you feel like I'm gone, I'm done?
No. Mm-mm. No, honestly, that was the most alive that I had ever felt as soon as it went off because of the overwhelming feeling of regret. Like I had never wanted to live for anything or fight for anything more in my life than just wanting to like not die in that moment.
Do you cry out to God in that moment? Your heart?
I think in my heart I did. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Because I remember the first thing that I remember thinking was, I didn't want to do that. Like I did not mean to do that. Those are the thoughts that were pouring into my head right when it happened.
Mm-hmm. And then
so
who finds you?
My mom. So that's another, insane miracle story that can only be pointed to God. She was working a full day of work. She worked from 7:30 to 5:30 every day. And I was on the phone with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
We were on a phone call. I think I'd mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
We were on a phone call, and she had to put me on hold a lot more than normal. And so I was honestly walking around the house with my phone in hand, waiting for her to come back on the line. And, at this same time, I was, I guess, preparing, to do this. And she had come back on the line. And I remember I was in her bedroom at this point, which is where the weapon was. And she came back on the line and said, like, hey, I'm back, whatever. And so I just remember almost falling into a panic. But it wasn't like a normal panic attack that I would have normally. It was more of a just like a really bad feeling, like a really bad gut feeling that something bad was about to happen. And so I remember one of the last things I said to her was, because we were talking about, ways that they can help me, support me, things that I could do. And I was like, I just need help. I just need help. That's all I know is I just need help. And so she says, okay, I have to put you back on hold. She puts me on hold again. And that's when it happens. And so by the time that the gun went off and I, had been injured, my phone was still on the line and it was sitting right next to me on the bed. And so she came back on the line and says, hey, Emma, I'm back. And obviously nothing. And then she says, hey, again, obviously nothing. And then on the third time, she says, don't move, stay right where you are. I'm coming home. Do not move. I'm coming home. And so she hangs up the line, grabs her stuff, leaves her office. And before that was like not okay. She usually had to get approval to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But she just said that she knew that something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something was bad. And so she speeds home, calls my dad on the way, lets him know what's going on. And he's more so optimistic. He's like, it's probably just, she's probably just in a corner crying somewhere. Just go home, calm her down, whatever. And so just to try to calm my mom, ease her nerves. And so she comes home and the last sound I remember hearing was the garage door opening and my dog belting, like barking, like
telling her come,
like literally barking, crying almost. Yeah. And so that was the last sound I remember hearing. And then I opened my eyes for a second because I remembered her coming into the room, like falling to her knees saying, oh my gosh, just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. And so And then I was out after that. And the next thing I remember was 3 to 4 days later in the hospital. So, but overall, you can't point that any other way. The feelings we had, the intuition, we had could only come from the Lord. I mean, there's nothing else you can.
Do you make that divine connection with him when you wake up and realize that you're not dead? Do you like reconnect?
Instantly, yeah. Instantly. Because I wouldn't, like, that's what I'm instantly as in that exact moment.
In that exact moment.
Right. Yeah.
When the gun goes off.
Yeah. Because I knew what I had just done. And in a moment, I was given this perspective that, otherwise I would have never gained. And for me, it's not like, you see in movies with the white lights and stuff like that. It's nothing like that. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling.
Wow. And so you go through the process of now really having to face all that has happened.
Yeah, that was really challenging because even though I was saved, both physically and spiritually in that moment, I still had my demons. And I still, had that pride and that shame attached to speaking up about how you really feel or sharing your emotions or, not being tough, not being, strong or, whatever, because that's all I had ever known. So I still had that shame, and that pride was the biggest thing that I had to overcome. And so waking up, realizing, initially when I woke up, I had no recollection of what had happened to me. The only thing I can remember thinking was how much pain I was in. I was in, like, overall, my entire body hurt. So that's like just about the only thing I can remember from the very early days coming down off of sedation, was just the physical pain. But then I would say I was in ICU for, I think, 3 weeks. And then I would say the 4th week in the hospital is whenever I truly, started to come back to. And that was really, really difficult because not only had I finally understood what I had done, but I had to run it back in my head and kind of go back through the steps to try to understand what put me here. And that was really difficult for me because prior to my attempt, I had never really thought of suicide. I had never really thought of actually making an attempt to take my life. I had what we classify now as suicidal ideations of, not really caring if you lived or died, or, feeling like you would just be better off or easier not being alive, or wishing that you had never been born, or those types of thoughts, riddled my mind sometimes, but never actively like, oh, I'm going to think of a plan, or, this is something that I could do or be capable of doing. So for me, it was like learning all of these things about myself so quickly.
So once you go through the process of understanding what the depths of your actions or the consequences of your actions are, how do you then process that with any sort of kindness and compassion for yourself?
I think that, so...
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand completely. And it's really a huge blessing the way that it all happened for me, because I was in the hospital, like hospital for a month, an entire month. And then after I left the hospital, I got moved to a rehab hospital for physical rehabilitation. And so I lived there. I was inpatient there. And I was there for about, like almost, I don't even know, like 3 months, 4 months. But while I was there, I met, it was the population in in that hospital was predominantly older people. And so I got to meet so many fantastic people with such incredible stories. And that's really where my faith blossomed, truly, because when I was in the hospital, I was very in the hospital. I was very on machines, chained to things. Couldn't really, I only could have one visitor in the room at a time. So it was very sterile in the hospital versus my rehab hospital was more of like my home. And I really could come to with my new spiritual journey and truly understand and dig into that relationship, that personal relationship. And it was, I remember the first few weeks being in the rehab hospital, I was still stubborn and prideful in that I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to be grateful that I had survived or been given a second chance. I was angry that if I lit, or why my anger was in the sense of, I lived, okay, great, but now I'm disabled for the rest of my life. So that was kind of what was inside of me whenever I was in the rehab hospital for the first few weeks. And then I remember one instant, I was in my room by myself eating, trying to eat at least. And I remembered I was sitting in my power chair because the entire time I was in the rehab facility, I was using an electric chair, a power chair. And so I was very immobile at this point still. And I was, just crying in a panic, hyperventilating, just very upset, very excited, very upset. And I remembered crying, like looking up at the sky and crying out to God saying, why are you doing this to me? Why are you punishing me? Like, why are you punishing me? I remember saying that, over and over and over. Why am I being punished? Why are you punishing me? And this is the first time that I had actually ever heard or felt rather, the power of God. When he spoke over to me, he said, I'm not punishing you, I'm rewarding you. I'm not punishing you, I'm rewarding you.
How do you process that? Because this doesn't feel like a reward.
I'm like, exactly. So when he spoke, but it was an overcoming, powerful moment.
You just knew.
I just knew that he was telling me that he was good, that it was good, that everything is good. And I just had in that moment, whenever those words were spoken over me, I was at peace. And that's whenever I decided to pick up the Bible that had been given to me as a gift. I decided to flip through it and see what it was about. And I just sat in that moment. And so it was truly the very first divine thing that I had ever felt in my entire life.
When you pick up that Bible, what's that moment like?
I was extremely excited. I just had so much joy, like in me, and I hadn't felt that in a really long time. I just had so much joy because I knew that there was hope. I knew that there was something to hope for, something to wait for, and there's just something good that's coming.
That you do have a hope for a future. That the enemy tried to tell you that there was no hope.
Yeah.
And so on this journey, as you birthed the documentary, what do you hope? What do you hope for every young person that is going through wearing the mask, trying to fit in? What do you hope the message will be from you to them about not getting to this point?
There's a lot of things that I hope that they take from my story and what I've experienced and what I've gone through. But the biggest thing is just that, have mercy on yourself. Be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and fight for yourself. Because, had I just allowed myself to be who I've always been, my true, authentic self, and I didn't try to clothe who I really am in somebody who I'm really not, then I could have been set free a lot sooner. And I could have saved not only myself, but all of my loved ones a lot of worry and heartache in this process. And you don't have to be okay all the time. Your life doesn't have to be perfect all the time. It's okay to not be okay. I wish that I would have known that to be true.
It's okay not to be okay.
It's okay not to be okay. And your silence will never keep you safe. It didn't keep me safe. It didn't protect me in the slightest. So being silent about how you really are feeling, being silent about, the way that things actually affect you, being silent on any regard when it comes to your mental health and your mental well-being is not what you need to do. You need to speak up and share your heart and share what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. What's the prognosis on walking?
I can walk. I actually can walk with a walker. I walk around my apartment with my walker. I try to get on my feet most of the time. But as far as progress, I don't really know I don't know what there's left for me. But I do know that where I came from and where I am now is a full recovery in my eyes. I feel like I have been fully physically rehabilitated in the sense that all of my goals that I had, I've achieved. And, it may not seem it on the outside from an outsider's perspective, but for me, I'm fully rehabilitated just because I know where I was and I know what I went through physically. And so to see where I am now, it's a huge win. And I relish in that win. But I don't ever give up either. I'm not going to ever stop trying to, walk better, walk faster, walk unassisted. I'm never going to stop trying to progress in every aspect of my life. And that's physical included. So that's where I am today with that.
Amazing. Tell people about the documentary and how they can connect with it.
Yes, of course. So the documentary film is coming to Ascension Parish soon. We also do have 2 screenings, one in Houma and one in Luling, that you can check out if you're in the Louisiana area and you want to come view the film and meet me and hear from our panelists and things like that. You can check out all of that information on our website. It's just www.myascension.us. So all of the information, like I said, for screenings that we have coming up, or ways that you can purchase the film and host your own screening, or just have the license to share with whomever. So there are all those options on the website. Again, just www.myascension.us. And we're on Facebook as well.
Mm-hmm. Are you blogging and talking to young people and to people?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's just called liferejuvenated.org, where I have still all of the blogs that I did before I got into public speaking and advocacy work. So you can definitely go check those blogs out. It's just on liferejuvenated.org. I still, like I said, have all those blogs up. However, I am doing a number of appearances, really wherever people would like me to invite me to come out, share my story, talk about these topics. I am more than happy to come out and share my story. You can also get all that information via the website on the Emma Speaks tab. So,
Emma, you're absolutely awe-inspiring.
Thank you.
And we know that the hand of God is upon your life, and you are going to touch the masses in implementing it's okay not to be okay, and that every person that is struggling mentally and with mental health issues will find a way to open their mouths and get the help that they need. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this.